As the coalition moves to pass the 2026 state budget by the end-of-month deadline, the Bank of Israel, in its annual report released this week, warned that the government is not pursuing the policies needed to ensure the Israeli economy thrives in the future. Professor Dan Ben-David, president of the Shoresh Institution for Socioeconomic Research and an economics professor at Tel Aviv University, told us that it is as if the two most significant bodies determining Israel's economy are existing in parallel universes. Joining us on the line is Professor Dan Ben-David, president of the Shoresh Institution for Socioeconomic Research and an economic professor at Tel Aviv University. We're speaking as the government is advancing the 2026 state budget, which includes a number of components, including notably an increase in the deficit, coalition funds, elements which the Bank of Israel had recommended against to keep the Israeli economy healthy. What's your take on this proposed legislation?
Well, the two most important bodies determining Israel's economy are the government and the Bank of Israel. And it's as though they're on two parallel universes, completely unrelated to one another. The government is going forth with the budget that you mentioned, which was probably not going to be relevant in any event because of the war with Iran that began after they prepared this budget. But we're already getting a glimpse of how they view the future. They are slashing across the board budgets in education, welfare, and so on, which makes sense in light of the fact that they need to finance the war. But on the other hand, as you noted, they're increasing money for coalition money for coalition partners, primarily the Haredim and the settlers, to the tune of about 5 billion shekels. This is in addition to monies in the past. So we're talking about their recommendations for the budget, while the Bank of Israel just released its annual report for last year and saying that everything needs to be exactly the opposite. Because of the situation that we've been facing a war for the past two and a half years, and the need for vast increases in money to rebuild the north, rebuild the south parts of Israel, rebuild the army and shattered lives, we don't have money for luxuries, and especially given the fact that we're going to have to pay a lot more, we need to increase taxes today and increase taxes in the future. And to increase taxes in the future, you need to grow faster. And that means invest in the things that promote growth. And the Bank of Israel is it highlights these issues very strongly, and primarily given the fact that Israel has an exceptionally large young population, under 20, just completely out of proportion with all other developed world countries, and the fact that these kids are getting the worst education in the developed world, way below other developed countries in core subjects. And that's not even including the Haredi boys who don't even study the material. That is the primary engine for growth in the future, and we're neglecting it. They're sitting in our classrooms today, and we're completely neglecting it. And in fact, instead of cutting coalition money, especially for schools that don't teach a full core curriculum, we're continuing to fund them and increase the money. The Bank of Israel says that we need to cut funding that encourages lifestyles of non-work, because we need Haredim and others, not just Haredim, to start working and working more for those who are working. The government is doing just the opposite. It's like just two parallel universes here. One's completely unconnected to reality, and the other one is trying to save us for the future and not having much luck.
Now, when you hear comments from government officials, they say we're in a time of emergency. This requires emergency measures. And they also say the Israeli economy is doing great. Look at the shekel. Look at how the stock market has performed. Look at inflation. So how do those two elements engage?
Well, first of all, Israel... It is true. Israel's economy is probably, if not the most resilient in the world, it's one of the most resilient in the world. We rebounded much more quickly than nearly every other country from COVID and from the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, and from the war, at least until this new part of the Iran war, which we don't know how we're going to come out of that. But we rebound very quickly, and the major reason for that is that we have a high-tech sector that's just phenomenal. It has a productivity that's 25% above the OECD average, but that's just 10% of our workforce. The rest, 90% of Israelis, have productivity that's 40% the OECD average. So it's like we have two economies here. One, those 10% in high-tech, they account for half of all of Israel's exports, which make all of our data look really good. But everybody else is living in as though it's a different country with much lower wages and much lower productivity and much less ability to recover. And when we look forward, we're going to need these other people to have the skills that our current high-tech have, especially given the fact that many of them are leaving Israel. But that's a whole different story. We need a lot more people to be with high-tech capabilities, and not just in high-tech. And we're not doing that. We're not investing in that. We're doing just the opposite. That's going to be a major problem in the future. In other words, we have an economy that bends, and we can bend it, but at some point it's going to break. And you can't continue to believe that it's going to continue this way forever if you keep abusing it. And that's what the government's been doing.
I heard one person, a critic of this current budget, describe it as if the economy is running on fumes. Would you agree with that outlook?
I don't know if it's on fumes, because we still have, I think even though we have increasing number of young and educated Israelis leaving the country, we still have quite a few here. There's no guarantee that if they think that that they're going to remain. And that's where we need hope, and that's where we need to show that we have a government that actually understands what we're looking at. I'll just give you one demographic example. There are not many Haredi adults in Israel. 6% of the adult population. But their fertility rates are 3 times larger than nearly all the other groups in Israel. So their share in the population is doubling every 25 years. In other words, 6% of the 50-year-olds.
ראשון לציון מערב.
The toddlers, 0 to 4 years old. They're over a quarter of those the toddlers. And in 25 years, they're going to be half the toddlers. Who's going to pay for all this? What kind of an education are they receiving? Are they even going to be in the army and the workforce, or they're not? And that's what the Bank of Israel is talking about in its report. That's what we've been talking about at the Shoresh Institution. These are things that if we don't deal with them now, and these elections are probably the most important ones we've ever had, because there is a democratic point of no return, things that are extremely difficult to pass in today's Knesset. At some point, they'll be impossible to pass. And then, the sky won't fall the day after, but it will fall afterwards, because we're heading in a direction that's just unsustainable.
So, given the necessity, as you note, for this long-term planning, this institutional, structural investment, and as you also note, we're heading into an election period. What is that point of no return? When might that happen? When will we face a situation, if there isn't an inclination to invest resources in these areas?
One of the things that we've been trying to show publicly to Israeli leaders and to the public at large for many, many years is the unsustainability of Israel's trajectory. What happened in the past 3 years is that penny has dropped, or as they say in Hebrew, the asimon has fallen. People understand that we have a problem. They may only see the tip of the iceberg and not see the complete iceberg, but it's created probably the best and possibly the final opportunity we'll ever have to make major course directions. For example, one of the things we discussed earlier, and the Bank of Israel also recommends, ensuring that all of Israel's schools teach a full core curriculum. One of the things that they do not do today. Many schools in Israel get public money to teach children things that are totally irrelevant for a modern global competitive economy. We need to fix these things. We need to change them. We need the kids who are now 0 to 4 years old, who are 26% of Haredim, they're in the army or not in the army. They're in the workforce or not in the workforce in just a dozen years from now. Who will be their physicians and their engineers, not to mention ours? We need them. And in addition to the Haredim, we have the Arabs in Israel who receive an education that's below many third world countries. In fact, if you compare Israeli Arabs in the most recent PISA exam in math, science, and reading, they scored below half of the Arab countries. There were 6 Arab countries that participated in the exam. Our kids scored below half of them, 3 of them. And the Arabs and the Haredim together comprise nearly 50% of the children in first grade today. And then we have the periphery, the kids in the social and geographic peripheries, who are also receiving an education below many third world countries. When these kids grow up, they will not be able to support a first world economy, only a third world one, which means they won't be able to maintain either first world healthcare or welfare, but also not an army that will defend us. And I don't know what will be our needs in 20, 30 years, but if they won't be able to basically provide what's needed to defend Israel, Israel doesn't have the luxury that other countries have of destroying themselves and becoming third world economies. We won't be. And this is becoming an existential issue. I think these elections are probably our last opportunity to take advantage of that realization that has happened here across the board between right wing, left wing. We've united in that regard in seeing what the future looks like if we don't start dealing with it.
And in Israel's current political landscape, do you think there are potential or existing decision makers who will see these priorities and make those shifts?
Well, I can tell you personally, we've shown this to every single one of Israel's leaders. They all understand the problem. Will they deal with them? I guess that depends on the kind of public pressure that will be brought to bear on them to start working together and put aside differences of left and right, religious and secular, Arabs and Jews. We have one country. Instead of arguing on the placement of deck chairs on the Titanic, it's time that we take advantage of possibly our last chance to move the ship in a different direction than that iceberg ahead of us.
Professor Dan Ben-David, president of the Soros Institution for Socioeconomic Research.